I naively believed when you went to go be a corporate lawyer, that you actually got to be part of structuring the deals and putting together these transactions and everything. Very shortly into my career, I realized the business people actually do all of that.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Kurt Donnell, President and CEO of Freestar. Freestar helps publishers and e-commerce sites and app developers maximize ad revenue. Kurt, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only because your unique experience joining Freestar, not as the founder, but someone kind of later in the development stage and in the building stage of the company, and so interesting in those experiences, how you manage those, how you set expectations, how you make it smooth, but also your experience at your previous role at YogaWorks, and kind of would love to break down the difference, honestly, of the expansion between online service companies and businesses and SaaS platforms and things like that versus like actual physical service locations that I feel are a little bit more complex. But before we get into all the good stuff with Freestar, what were you doing before you started the company, and what led you to Freestar?
Thanks so much for having me, Julian. Appreciate it. So I joined Freestar at the beginning of 2019, I guess hired gun CEO. I'd known the founders, though, for a few years before this. I'd actually almost joined the company almost exactly 2 years before I did. It was a very young company at that time, I don't know, 8 or 10 people, something like that. And sort of at the same time, I had the chance to potentially join YogaWorks, which was going to do an IPO and do a roll-up of yoga studios. So there was a weekend where I was kind of back and forth. Do I go to this like crazy little tiny startup that was in ad tech, which I'd been at a couple companies ago? Or do I go do something different, do an IPO, scratch that itch, and ultimately decided to do the YogaWorks thing, but
Yeah.
stayed in touch with the founders and sort of was cheering from the sidelines for a couple of years. And honestly, they went and kind of did all of the things that they had indicated they might be able to do and more, frankly. And so when I got back in touch with David, one of the founders, late 2018, I guess, and they were sort of indicating they were ready to have somebody come in and lead the next stage of growth, I was lucky enough to get tapped to do that. But it was,
Yeah.
like most good relationships, something that kind of nurtured over time, and we had the chance to build the trust, and I got to see what they were doing. So it was just one of those things that
Yeah.
followed along for a while, and the timing was just right. I feel like that happens a lot. We've had a
Yeah.
number of really great folks join the company after we've known them for years and kind of
Yeah.
give them the pitch for a while, and then there's that right moment when the universe pushes it in front of you at a time when you're ready to listen, and kind of happened for me in this one.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like a lot of founders will describe, and people who join companies that are in that stage of growth will describe the same experience, and just finding the right timing when things align. And a lot of that is really
Yeah.
understanding when your skill set is actually needed for that stage of the company. Because you can fit in different pieces. And obviously I want to jump into the transition at Freestar, but just taking a step back to YogaWorks, it was so fascinating learning about being the first boutique fitness company to actually IPO. What was the purpose behind the IPO? Why was it such an important milestone for the company, being that you could have just sustained a profitable private business? What
Sure.
behind it was motivating to do that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple elements to it. The company actually had been around for a long time. It was 30 years old, but had really kind of picked up its growth in the few years before I joined. A couple different private equity firms had been involved, but then Great
Yeah.
Hill Partners, which had bought it at that point in time, really accelerated the growth through doing some acquisitions, did so very accretively. And so the thesis kind of held together that by raising additional capital and potentially being able to use the public company currency as part of the acquisition proceeds, if you will, to the seller, there might be able to be an acceleration of that. There was also a time, if you remember, this was 2017, something like that,
Yeah.
2016, 2017. Boutique fitness was
Everyone's into
really on
yoga.
the rise, and
Yes.
yoga was having a time. And so I think there was a belief also that the market wanted this. Like you said, there was no other boutique fitness companies that were public at that moment. So seemingly investor sentiment liked the idea of being able to play that sector a little bit. And so ultimately we did take it public. It was probably a little too small in hindsight when you look at that, and just having now had the experience of running a public company. It's way more
Mm.
expensive than anybody ever thinks about, between your listing fees and the lawyer fees and investor relations and
Yeah.
directors and officers insurance and all of those things. It's just expensive to be public, and it adds
Yeah.
just a level of complexity to everything you do, because you're always thinking about what is the market going to react to
Yeah.
this or whatever it may be. So in hindsight, maybe a little bit too small to have done it, but the factors in the market seem to play in favor of investors wanting to do this. Good timing in the market to grow a boutique fitness business. There was a competitor called Core Power Yoga that
Yeah.
you've probably seen around that was building a more national chain. It was a little more fitnessy yoga, if you will, a little more kind of sweaty, partially
Yeah.
low yoga, fitness mixed versus YogaWorks was a little more on the traditional yoga side of things. And so we were finding studios that were maybe a little more of the, I don't know, meditative side of yoga, if you will, or something like that. And so it
Mhm.
was kind of the juxtaposition between YogaWorks and Core Power a little bit at the time. So
Yeah.
interesting couple of years of my life for sure.
When you mentioned you were refining the studios, was there some kind of acquisition or acqui-hire type of partnership? What did that look like? And was that essentially what allowed the expansion to really grow so quickly to kind of create that mass adoption?
Yeah, it was a stated roll up of yoga studios. I
Yeah.
was leading corp dev and general counsel as well at the time, but I was literally flying around the country, meeting yoga studio owners, taking yoga class, and then going out to dinner with them, convincing them to sell me their studios. It was a interesting couple years. Like I said, I got to meet some characters, got to do a bunch of yoga, which was fun at the time. But yeah, it was all acquisitions. We weren't doing greenfield openings at that point in time. I think we acquired 21 studios and 13 acquisitions in 12 months or something in that range. So it was moving quickly and it was working. The frustrating part, I suppose, the entire thesis of the IPO was that it was a roll up, and every day we announced an acquisition, our stock price went down. It just made
Yeah.
no sense at all, given that was what the purpose of the deal was. But yeah,
Yeah.
as is life, sometimes things don't work out as anticipated.
Yeah. Well, thinking also, you come from an interesting background as well, being that you were an attorney for a while and then got
Yep.
into the startup life. What was that decision transition like? What kind of piqued your interest about startup life? Were you working with startups at the time? Give us the story behind you as the attorney turning into you as a startup and being in this environment as an entrepreneur.
Sure. I think naivety is a piece of it. I naively believed when you went to go be a corporate lawyer, that you actually got to be part of structuring the deals and putting together these transactions and everything. And
Yeah.
very shortly into my career, I realized the business people actually do all of that. They strike the deal and everything, and the lawyers just write it down. And you have to be wildly risk averse and all of those things. Just from a personality standpoint, I'm not very risk averse. I
Yeah.
prefer doing things where there's a high degree of consequence, I suppose, and things that are fun and fast moving. And for better or worse, working at a law firm was just not the right fit for me. I did
Yeah.
get the chance to work on some incredible deals, big, small companies, startups, public companies, all sorts of things. So I got a good lay of the land.
Mhm.
I was, I can say it, pretty miserable when I was at a law firm, but in hindsight now, being out of it for a decade plus, I did learn so much from it because I did get to see hundreds of deals done by different companies in different industries and got these little mini MBAs and so many different business models
Yeah.
that I always thought I'll take this lesson from that. I would never do it that way, but I would do it this way. And so in hindsight, it was one of the best things I could do because I got to see so many businesses. And
Yeah.
I guess it was 2012, had the chance to go in-house at a digital media company with the specific goal of switching over to the business side, or at least combining both of them. Technically, my
Yeah.
job was general counsel, but within a couple months was running the business development team and then audience development, corporate development, a bunch of different things. Sort of ended up in a COO-ish role there. So it was very
That's a
much my
tough
goal to get out of
transition.
law.
That's not a smooth you can't just skate over that transition. That's not a smooth one. It's like, oh, general counsel, and then I ran business development. And then what was
Yeah.
that? Did you join the company and was that an express kind of interest of yours to the leadership team at the time? And were they open to that? Was there any friction there?
Yeah. So my undergrad and master's degree, both in accounting. So like the business side of things has always been
Yeah.
interesting to me. And even when I was on the lawyer side, I kind of leaned in as much as I could on helping some of the business things. And my old boss would like jokingly, whenever the crazy earnout things you had to write, it was more like writing down this business deal, but it's hard to do in legal language. So I'd always get those. So I always liked the business side of things. And that company I joined, which is called She Media, subsequently sold to Penske Media, was getting spun out of its old parent company. And randomly, there was a guy that was sort of friend of a friend of mine that was hiring for this role inside of the company to be spun
Yeah.
out, that was a lawyer, had switched over to the business side. And so interestingly enough, the PE folks that were kind of doing this spin out one way or another, maybe liked this combo legal corp dev, biz dev
Yeah.
role. And so there was a little bit of a blueprint of seeing somebody do this in the past that
Mm.
I just drafted off of or something. I mean, I certainly was clear that I wanted to get more involved in the business side when I was interviewing. It happened a little more quickly than anticipated. And I think it's an element of if there's something you want to do in life, raise your hand and give it a shot. There was a bit of a hole in the BD side. And so I leaned in with my legal hat on first of like, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And then quickly, I guess, showed attitude and aptitude to
Yeah.
be able to actually help lead that team, and always a bit of a salesman at heart. Like I love getting a deal done. And
Yeah.
so one way or another, it kind of happened, but it was definitely internally my goal to make that happen. I think I had said it somewhat expressly, and there was an example of somebody doing it that I could point to of like, see, it can work. And look, see
Yeah.
that guy right over there. And so there was all of those things. My buddy Keith, I guess I owe him, I do him a debt of gratitude. He helped me get the job, but also paved the path a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense coming from the legal side. It's almost like a full cycle sales individual, right? I mean, I don't know, VP, you can literally director, you put any title on it because there's so much legality that is involved at the end of the deal process. But also on the accounting side, I mean, so much of the business development process is just creating a funnel and being so analytical, analytics based, and not for any reason, but to know what's working, what's not. And I feel like those skill sets, along with some charisma, I guess, make for a solid salesperson. For a lot of times when companies are bringing on their first sales hire, and I guess being kind of this overall founder, what's been challenging for you, kind of in that hiring process, being that you can kind of tackle all these little elements of the company. Do you find it challenging to find people to pick up tasks, objective things off your plate?
So I came into Freestar, I was employee probably 25-ish, 25 or 26 at the time. And they had had a lot of success, had grown the company. It was very engineering heavy and pretty light on kind of the customer success side of things and the business development side. David, one of the two co-founders, he's still involved in the business all the time, is one of the best BD people I've ever met in my life. And so he really took care of the sales side, and to this day has been far closer to that side of the business than I have. He prefers the actual selling piece than the management. So we do have a woman that kind of leads all of the supply side of our business, which is our publisher relationships, and runs sort of the business of business development, if you will. I will say we've had different success over time. It's a very interesting solution we sell. It basically is the publisher creates the content, gets the audience, and they outsource the entire revenue function to us. So from a sales standpoint, it's a pretty collaborative and consultative sale because they've got to trust you that you're going to make more money for them and cut them a check at the end of the month. And it's kind of putting all the eggs in one basket. So it takes the right person to be able to build those relationships. And so it is a pretty technical sale to some extent. It depends on obviously the complexity of the individual publisher, their experience, and all of those things, but it's not something that's super easy to throw anybody into. So over the years, we've had sort of BDR programs to help open doors. We've figured out ways that we can bring in people that really don't know ad tech at all and sort of train them from the ground up. We have something called our ad tech associate program, where every 6 months or so, we bring in a class of 4 to 6 folks that are either looking to change careers, kind of straight out of college, whatever that may be, and train them. They rotate through all of our different groups in these 2 to 3 week sort of stints, almost like internships sort of, but they're paid employees. And then after that, figure out kind of where they want their forever home to be. And so that actually came out of starting with business development reps, learning the business. Multiple of those folks ended up going to other places. And so we've built this kind of pipeline of folks from very junior, and some of them are very experienced, but new to ad tech people. And some of those have gone into sales. Some of them have gone into publisher support or engineering or BI or all over the place. So it's been a learning curve for us. Certainly in the more senior roles, we brought in people from the industry that have shown great success at related companies that have a specific skill set, and it's changed over time. I think a big part of the people we needed when we were 25 people versus the people we need now that we're 200 is process matters a little bit more right now. Building scalable systems matters a little more, whereas that sort of jack of all trades that can wear multiple hats is the most useful thing you can have at 30 people. And that's changed, and sometimes people outgrow companies, sometimes companies outgrow people, but I think it's that sort of change in what you need out of the systems and everything that dictates a lot of that.
Yeah. What change came with Freestar that kind of signaled you that it was the right time to come in and actually scale the different components, create some operational sophistication around them, or maturity, I guess. What was that signal when you saw, obviously you were a fan for a while, and when was it time to jump in? When did you feel like it was ready?
I think it was clear that there was product market fit. There was a need for what was happening right now. I knew a number of the people inside the company because I used to work with them. So I had some insights on where things were going well and where there was just opportunities to get a lot more efficient. I
Mm.
don't mean this as a slight because it was a startup and everybody was hustling and doing everything, but there wasn't a lot of process and procedure. There was a focus on just engineering and building new things and a little bit of chasing shiny objects, which you kind of need to do at the outset
Yeah.
sometimes. I I guess I saw an opportunity for us to really hone in on going to be the best at the thing we could be the best at. I'm a big believer in companies should do that. And only once you've done that do you move one swim lane over. I've said it on many podcasts, but I'll repeat that because I think it's something that people make a mistake of doing. They get pretty good at one thing, and then they see this other thing that's 5 swim lanes over, and they're like, well, I can do that too. The moment you do that, you're kind of bifurcating your company's time because some people are going to like that product better than your existing product or whatever it is. And you're going to split your time, energy, resources, and probably hurt your core business. So that was something that I saw. If we kind of narrow the offering and go be really great where Freestart found a niche, we could double down on that. I saw a lack of customer service, really. I think there was
Yeah.
15 engineers and one account manager. Like, that's not going to work. Even in a tech business, the customer service side of things really can help you win. And I would say it's a differentiator that we've had over the years is we've really provided white glove service and been a little more custom in our solutions than cookie cutter. And so that was a bit of the differentiation that I it's easy to, in hindsight, now that we've grown the company 5 or 6x or whatever it is, it's easy to say like, well, of course I saw that back then. I probably didn't see it all back then, but
Yeah.
just sort of got a little sniff of, okay, if we fix this, this, and this, it feels like we could probably accelerate things. And the company was just ready to put on, it's big boy, big girl pants and grow up a little bit. And so it's just
Yeah.
kind of the right time. And I did have a bit of a weird background where I could help on the accounting side and the legal side and the sales side and had run a public company. And so kind of understood what it took to get to that level of sophistication at some point. Not that that's where we're heading, but it just let me kind of flex all the different muscles I've built over the years.
Yeah. When you talk about kind of growing that customer service department and I guess a component of your business, how do you do that nowadays when we outsource a lot of service agents or add numerous amount of automated tools to minimize the amount of
Yep.
work that one account manager has? How are you able to do that as a company in today's age when there's so many options and there's caveats to a lot of them, right? If you outsource, then there's some kind of friction there and vice versa in other ways.
Sure.
How do you make that decision?
I think it's evolved over time in the almost 5 years I've been here for sure. We didn't have things automated. I think the important thing is to automate the things that computers are really good at and that people continue to do the things that people are really good at doing. And having that human touch where there's a relationship that's built over time is going to help you get over the bumps in the road. And there's always bumps in the road. No computer can do that. And so I think it's figuring out the mix of we've automated this because it's actually more efficient for you, customer,
Yeah.
and you're getting better service as a result of it. But hey, I'm here for you whenever there's a one-off, or we need to make some recommendations on XYZ, or there's a problem that you've identified that we caused, or we've identified that you caused, or whatever that is. That's going to take that human element. And so I think it's finding that mix of what is best suited to do this. Is this an automatable task, or should it be automated because it's
Right.
actually more efficient? Or are we just trying to save some costs? And I think that's always a balance. And it's not always easy to figure out what the ROI is on customer success spend. But if you figure your retention rate goes up a little bit, as always, it's a hell of a lot easier to keep your existing customers than go get new ones. And if you save one customer, it probably pays for that person over the course of the year.
Yeah.
Extrapolate that out. So not afraid to throw some people at problems at times. It is obviously a balance of when you do that, but trying to automate everything is not a good call. People still
Yeah.
want a person on the other end of the line. They really do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, also, I think more so than ever, even in today's climate, when companies aren't thinking about scaling at all costs, it's thinking about creating big, sustainable, sophisticated businesses who have maybe even a human touching component to it and really focusing on customer retention. And
Yeah.
that touches so many different parts of the business. And how, as a founder, do you make sure that every part of the business you're focusing on that retention or that experience rather than kind of building for what you think is necessary? How do you maintain that, that consistent, intimate relationship with your customer while you continue to grow and things get larger?
Yeah, it's something that was just really woven into the fabric of our company. Literally, our company name, Freestar, we do business, but our actual formal entity name is Publisher First Inc. And our
Yeah.
number one sort of core value inside of the company is publisher first. And it is the idea, partly because of our business model, but because we set out to do that we sit on the same side of the table as the publisher. It's a revenue share model. So we really do only win when they win, but kind of instilling that from the outset that we put the publisher first in what we do. And if we kind of keep that in the back of our minds, we're going to be more successful over time. From
Yeah.
a more tactical standpoint, we're very transparent with the team. Net Promoter Score is something we focus on quite a bit, and we literally pipe it into our Slack. Every single Net Promoter Score, good, bad, or ugly, goes straight into a Slack channel. So the entire company can read it, from the most entry-level engineer to the CFO to everybody in between is able to see that and feels it. And there's a lot of commenting in that channel, and we take it very seriously. So it's a piece of that. Focusing on retention is a big thing, both in sort of logo retention, but then net revenue retention. We talk about that and are very transparent about that with the company every month. So it's just kind of woven into what we do, how we think, how we make decisions, all of that stuff. And it has been from the outset. I was very lucky to come into the company with that sort of mindset of publisher first being instilled. There were some things I was able to probably help push forward a little bit on how do we double down on the customer success side to make sure we're living up to that. But it was already part of the ethos of the company, which I was very
Yeah.
lucky to see. Yeah. So it's just kind of everything you do, every interaction, the way you talk to your internal team, the way you talk externally, it kind of builds that flywheel around that concept getting bigger and stronger and helping.
Yeah. Yeah. Describe the traction you've seen up to this point. What's been exciting since you've joined the company up till now, and what's particularly exciting about what's on the next frontier for Freestar?
Sure. So when I joined, we were about 25 people and 35 million in revenue. Now we're 200 and well north of 200 in revenue. So it's been a pretty wild ride just from a growth standpoint. And so that's been a lot of fun. It comes with its challenges. I think there's an element of always pushing and setting higher goals, even if you know they're going to be a stretch, that keeps
Yeah.
people hustling and working a little harder. And I think
Yeah.
staying appropriately unsatisfied is important and never getting complacent. Like, we always believe we can do better. And we end up saying at the beginning of every year when we kind of do the recaps, it feels like we're just getting started every year because we see so much opportunity in front of us. Big thing over the course of the last 12 to 18 months we've been focusing on is really our data science team and what they're doing on the machine learning side. It's not sort of as much AI, but really machine learning on how do we optimize every auction so it tips the
Mhm.
scale in favor of the publisher. And that is, who are the bidders that we bring into the auction for every impression based on geo, connection type, device type, all of those things, where, a
Yeah.
3G connection in India is going to be a different auction than a 5G connection in Manhattan, where you're sitting right now, because of the speed at which things load and can come back. And so we've done
Yeah.
some really interesting things there and have so much more to do on that front. So I'm excited about that. Sort of technically, I also am sort of joking we're in Freestar 3.0 now, as we've gotten to be a much bigger company, and building that additional process procedure, some more of those automations of things that really computers should be doing and not people, is something we've
Yeah.
been spending a lot of time on, and just sort of further honing in on your exact target market and how do we create stickier relationships with our partners by offering additional services. Again, not chasing shiny objects that are way off in the distance, but we used to only do desktop and mobile web, and now we do in-app monetization. And it used to be heavily display, and now we've got full suites of video products. And just doing those things, we can help with email newsletters now, and just kind of expanding that concentric circle of services that are around our client, I think is exciting as well, and making sure that we're as kind of one-stop shop as we can be for people. So the future is
Yeah.
bright. Always does feel like we're just getting started. Every time you're like, God, that was broken, or this still is broken. I know we can do better. I know we can do better.
Yeah.
We keep doing that. And then as you grow, you either find or create new problems. And so it's this
Yeah.
kind of very good cycle that continues over time.
Yeah, I think focusing on the right things is so key to that success. And it sounds like you and your team are, which is, how can you continue to deliver value to the customer? How can you continue to allow them to monetize on the ads that they're promoting, and continue to increase their ability to do that? Obviously, I'm always excited about rev share models, as I think they create this really, I guess, fair relationship between company or service
Yep.
and practitioner or actor. How is that model versus taking a fee or taking something up front? How do you think that has both been advantageous, but also has its disadvantages when you're thinking about scaling and growing your company and bringing
Sure.
on more customers?
So I always think if you can figure out in any business how you can position yourself as a partner, not a vendor, it's really
Yeah.
beneficial. And the fact it's sort of upside down the way our model works, we actually cut a check to the people that we're trying to bring on as customers. We're trying to find new digital media publishers that want to outsource this monetization function to us versus them doing it themselves. I don't think we've touched on it yet. Most ads are sold in a real-time auction now. So in a matter of milliseconds, an auction is run to see who's willing to pay the most for your eyeballs at that moment. And it
Yeah.
changes over time based on your browsing history, context of the page, whether you left something in a cart that you didn't check out on, all of these things. So it's increasingly complex as privacy and a host of different things become more important. And there's a bunch to this. So publishers are looking to outsource this here more and more over time. So it's been an interesting sort of change as we've seen that market mature, I guess. And then, sorry, here, what was the specific question again? I was lost a little bit in the train of thought there about the industry itself.
No, yeah.
Yes. So the beauty in that is these publishers are, should I do this in-house? Should I do this out, outsource this? And being on a rev share, they have some faith that we're incentivized to make this better.
Mhm.
And we cut our customers a check. So it kind of flips that relationship where they're actually getting something from us, not having to pay it. And that is something that we've seen other
Wow.
folks in the ad tech space, even though they're offering services that increase revenue, the publisher's actually collecting that revenue and that has to pay the person as a vendor. And even getting approval from finance departments to have to cut a check is really challenging at times versus cutting them a check. So there's an elegance to that whole thing. And I really think it is sitting on the same side of the table. So you're both
Yeah.
incentivized to work with each other as partners to grow revenue, to grow traffic, any of those things, because we both see upside from it. So I think that alignment is great. In terms of any downsides to it, obviously it does fluctuate a bit from a forecasting standpoint. If a site, for instance, does something that hurts their SEO and their traffic goes way down, we feel the pain with them much like we see the gain with them if things go well. Investors don't quite understand rev share models as much as SaaS, but once you show them that the retention metrics are very SaaS-like
Yeah.
and we can actually grow customers year over year and have done so consistently, it actually can be a better model, but it's just less understood than the sort of repetitive nature of a SaaS fee, right?
Which is bizarre because if you think about where do you not have a ceiling in terms of budget, right? If you charge the publishers, then you'll always be subject to what they're going to be paid at whatever market condition they're going to be paid at versus
Yep.
what are people willing to spend for that space, and then just splitting that. And so then you get better as they get better. And that they're able to capture more, and then you don't have to adapt as a company, which is awesome because the publishers
Yep.
are adapting for you and you just handle all those services behind the scenes. I mean, it's brilliant. And I'd always love to discuss those because they're hard. They're not scalable when you start building them out. But once the flywheel starts going, they really become really powerful machines. Hard to be impacted by external factors, which is what you want as a CEO. And thinking about just like whether it's external, internal at this point in time, what do you view as some of the biggest risks that the company faces today?
I think the world is just changing in terms of how people find and consume content. It's been interesting to see the shifts, even from sort of desktop, mobile, web to social in some ways over the years. And then even in the last year, I heard a statistic the other day that Facebook and Twitter are sending 60% less traffic to external websites than they were a year ago. I
Yeah.
think they are focused on keeping things inside of their walled gardens even more than they have in the past. I think what happens with AI search is going to be really interesting here. So I think just following the trends of kind of website traffic and how people are consuming information is going to be really interesting. There's a lot of changes in the privacy front, third-party cookies you may have heard of sort of how people are
Yeah.
tracked as they interact with websites. There's some changes coming there. It gets a lot of press. Ultimately, we'll figure out solutions to those things. So I'm not as worried. And then more from an internal standpoint is how do we keep maintaining culture as we grow the business? And we're 100% remote, which is somewhat unique in that we've done it very much by design versus defaulting into it during COVID. So we've been able to, I think, be better about that than some. But anytime you go from 25 people to 200 and then 200 to 300 to 500. You got to manage that. And how do you make sure everybody still feels the same way and is acting the same way? I'm really proud of how kind our team is, how hardworking and passionate and really willing to help each other, which we've managed to do as we've gone from 25 to 200, but we got to keep that going as we grow, because I think it's kind of a hallmark of our business and has allowed us to be successful in a lot of ways.
Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
I don't know. And it sounds like a non-answer. Both David, our founder, and I are wildly focused on really two things. It's building an objectively great business that's very profitable. And after you do those two things, you can worry about the outcome, but the outcome will become clear when it's time for the outcome to happen. We do have private equity investors. David had a co-founder that kind of left the business operationally when I came in, and ultimately sort of left from a sales standpoint at the end of 2020. So we've got private equity investors that, of course, would like a return at some point in time. And so I imagine we'll have an exit here in the next few years at some point. But what exactly that looks like, I don't know, and genuinely don't care. I want it to be wildly lucrative, of course, but it could take a number of different shapes, whether it's another private equity firm or strategic. As I guess I alluded to earlier, I don't like the idea of two small public companies. So an IPO is probably a little ways out, but you never know what's in the cards. And we've been acquisitive. We've bought 3 or 4 companies in the last few years. And so we're growing mainly organically, but have the ability to grow inorganically too. And so always keep the door open for that, of potential opportunities to get better through combinations as well.
Yeah. I always love this next section. I call my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions, and so here we go. So my first question I always like to open it up with is, what's particularly hard about your job day to day?
I think it varies so much, and the zooming in and out from 30,000 feet down to 5,000 feet back to 30,000. I like to be in the weeds and understand things, but specifically making sure that you're delegating things that are not your highest and best use, I think is just tough at times. I think it is for anybody, but as the team's gotten bigger and the layers between myself and some of the more junior folks on the team are different, making sure you're delegating and setting up the process and everything so that it is really efficient, but we're still getting the message conveyed the same way versus a game of telephone, I think can be challenging at times, but it is that kind of up and down. And as CEO, you play therapist a lot. Let's not lie. Like a big chunk of it is the people management and how do we get people moving in the right direction, and the whole company moving in the right direction, the exec team doing the right things when we got to restructure something or move one group from the other place. How do you make sure you get everybody on board and bought into that? So the therapist part takes a lot of time, I would say.
Yeah. You echo a lot of things that founders express, which is that the people and that emotional component that's so critical, not only to building your team, but even to yourself. And what are some ways as a founder that you would recommend to other founders that they should kind of extract themselves from the business, recharge, and not be so subject to the ups and downs of what goes on day to day?
Yeah, I would certainly recommend organizations like YPO or EO. I've been in YPO for a couple of years, and it's very nice to have the opportunity to have a very close group of your peers that you can be wildly open and honest about the challenges that sort of you uniquely face, either as an entrepreneur or a CEO. It's just a different set of challenges. It's easy for people to be like, oh, those are easy. That's not a big deal, whatever. But it is. Like, we all have our different stresses in life, one way or the other. And having folks around you that are in a similar situation where you can be very honest about the challenges you're facing, I think is wildly important. I've also had the chance recently, I'm in the midst of it right now, to participate in this group of 20 or 25 CEOs doing this conscious business leadership program that actually comes with an executive coach. It's the first time I've had a formal executive coach, and I've got to say it's incredible. It's kind of like business therapy, I guess, sticking with the therapy vein here, but it's really good to make you zoom out, look at yourself, and then hold yourself accountable to things. I was part of a different CEO group before I had joined YPO that was really interesting as well. So I would say figuring out ways to surround yourself with folks that are going through similar challenges, it makes you feel sane to some extent. But the people have probably already been through and solved a lot of the challenges you have, so you can kind of draft off of what they've learned a little bit. So I would recommend finding a peer group and potentially a coach as well.
Yeah. What group is the coaches? Like the Mashari method? Is it something similar? I'm curious.
I don't know the formal method, actually.
Sorry. I was wondering if it was the company. The Mashari method is like, they famously do like the Airbnb CEO, OpenAI. They do coaching for CEOs.
Yeah. It is through this sort of holistic program I was lucky enough to get sponsored to do. So it wasn't something where I actually went and engaged the coach directly. I'm sure I could figure it out and we can drop it in the show notes or something like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head. Probably should, huh?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's all good. Being that one thing I was researching your company that I was curious would have an effect, or if you think about it a lot, is just the changes that Web3 brings into advertisement and also with that privacy and those cooking, the information, being able as a consumer to opt in and opt out in those different platforms. Do you think about how the effect of that has on your company, or is it pretty far out that it won't have an immediate effect, but you do think about it? Where's your thoughts about its impact on your company, your business?
I, th- I mean, it's always evolving, and there's elements of it that get woven into even the more traditional models, as I mentioned, like AI search and AI content creation is an element of things. I guess true Web3, more metaverse style. There is advertising there. We have not yet gone to play there. I think we do need to see what really unfolds in terms of usage. It seems very cool. I just, at least anecdotally, have not seen the rush of people to it, maybe as much as it gets headlines. And that's just maybe the folks that I
Yeah.
hang out with and talk to. So maybe I'm not a representative group here. There's definitely a play there. I think some of the things you're going to see become more interesting is programmatic advertising into gaming. For instance, you're playing a racing game and the billboard up on the side of the track actually is being sold programmatically based on that user's history and all of those things. I think that's pretty interesting. There's ways that into even TV, they can dynamically insert different ads into the picture frame behind the actor. Like some of those things I think are
Yeah.
pretty fascinating, the different formats the advertising is going to take and adapt. So whether it's truly
Yeah.
Web3 metaverse style things versus some different formats we're seeing, I think there's going to be massive changes that are very interesting
Yeah.
and present opportunities. Even digital out of home advertising is getting
Yeah.
a lot more impactful and prevalent as you see second screens on all sorts of things, whether it's the gas pump or whatever it is.
Bridge. Yeah.
More opportunities to engage with people and try to figure out, obviously, how to
Right.
entice them one way or the other to support the local business, whatever that is. I think it's going to be an interesting time here as digital just become
Yeah.
an even bigger part of our lives. It's hard to think it could be more a part of our lives, but it is woven in just more ways every single day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not just because you're a guest on my show, but I am truly impressed with how you've structured the business because it does, was stated earlier, you don't have to adapt as much as the publishers and that relationship and their relationship with their audience adapts. But you're probably the biggest challenge is just staying up to date with the technology and how to track and how to continue to monetize and adding more features that focus on that value. And thinking about what's been impactful in your career being a CEO now, what's had a lasting impact, whether it's a book or a person, what's something that has had a lasting impact even today?
Maybe cheesy, but I think my parents, both of them have had the attitude that they can sort of do anything their entire lives. Like my dad was a dentist, but he was building a house. My first job, I was a carpenter, and we just wired the entire houses ourselves. Like I don't know, he kind of knew how to be an electrician. And so we just became electricians, like did that. I ultimately worked for an electrician for a while and wasn't an electrician, but the willingness to just go do that or, build anything, take on any challenge. My mom similarly has done a host of different things, entrepreneurial side of things, worked for different companies, run food banks, worked in sort of equity investing, a host of different things. And so I think the willingness to just go try anything and figure it out was something that was instilled in me at a young age, which I was grateful for. And to this day, I believe curiosity is one of the best traits you can have at work, where you kind of go pull on
Yeah.
a string. You're like, oh, that's interesting. And you go dig in and just try to figure it out. I think it's going to help anybody in their career. As a result, I've built, thankfully, a lot of skills in a lot of different areas, whether it's working on the corporate finance side of things, managing a cap table, to how do we motivate employees and that side of things, to building a budget, to the technical elements of how do we optimize serving ads. I've just been lucky enough to get to dig in on all of them. And it really came from just asking questions and finding people that were kind enough to give me answers and spend the time. But I always ask why, like that annoying kid thing of like, well, why? Explain it to me. And if I ever ran into a brick wall of like, well, because we've always done it that way, I'm like, no, that's the wrong answer. We have to like dig in and figure out how do we make it more efficient,
Yeah.
all of those things. But it just, I guess, all roots back to curiosity, and that probably goes back to my childhood.
Yeah, I love that. I know we could continue on this conversation for probably 2 or 3 more episodes, but we're coming to the close here. And so I want to make sure that We didn't leave anything on the table. Is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have? Anything that we left on the table today?
Geez. No, I mean, I think we covered most of it. I would just double down on the fact that every business should really focus on taking care of its people and taking care of its customers, and the rest will kind of take care of itself. It's something that gets lost here is the people side of things, particularly as we think about Web3 and automation and all of that stuff. Like, don't underestimate how important
Yeah.
people are in the long run, because they are the ones that are going to be there when there's a challenge, and they'll get you over the humps. That's, I guess, the last thing I would leave here is don't forget about your people.
Amazing. And Kurt, last little bit is where can we find you? Where can we be a fan? Give us your Twitter, your LinkedIn. Where can we be a big supporter of you as a CEO?
Yeah, I'm not huge on social media, but LinkedIn, I think linkedin.com/Kurt Donnell or something like that. You can go find it there. And then just freestar.com. If you've got a website and need some help, even if it's just a conversation about what do traffic trends look like here in the future, how can I optimize that side of it? And of course, the monetization side, we're happy to help. So look us up on freestar.com and drop us a line.
Amazing. Kurt, it's been such a pleasure learning about your background and what's really driven your success all these years, but also what's exciting about Freestar, how you've built such an incredible business with as a fan, but now as a CEO, and really kind of thinking about how to create a sophisticated, really scalable company. It's always exciting when your founders reach that point and CEOs get to that point, the transitions that come along with that. So anyways, we covered a lot of stuff here, but ultimately, thank you for being on the show. I hope you enjoyed yourself today.
Absolutely, Joe. It was great, man. Appreciate you having me.